Okay, so welcome to the Water Cooler Chat Show. I'm your host, Nadine K. Thompson, and today we have another amazing author with us. The chat show, the Water Cooler Chat Show, is part of the virtual book tour. And this year we'll be interviewing about 6 or 7 authors. So, in association with the Activate Core and with Jenny and with other authors, virtual book tour, we welcome you. So thank you, Sanji or SL Clayton, for joining us today. So can you tell us a bit about where you're joining us from?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm based in the United Kingdom, just on the edge of London, what we call Greater London, so on the outskirts of London.
Okay. And okay, so tell me a little bit about your writing and your journey as a writer.
I suppose it started when I was quite young. My mum taught me how to read and write before I started primary school. My mother is of Jamaican background. My parents, yeah, both Jamaican background. I was born and brought up in the UK, and back in Jamaica, my mum was a preschool teacher. She had a little preschool, and so she was a stickler for education and reading, writing, arithmetic type of thing. So she kind of, I think, used that experience and love of words, to make sure that I was really prepped before I went to school. And so that's where the love started. She used to take me to the library on a weekly basis. We both get our books, etc. Way up until like early teens, really. And I would say that is my inspiration, I think, for having a love of reading and a love of writing, because at school, English literature were my favorite subjects. So somewhere along the way, I can't pinpoint it, I think I've always felt like I wanted to write a book. And I've always start and stop, start and stop and start and stop, and couldn't really finish a book, and I didn't understand why. And I think I gave myself a target when I got into my 40s. I said, I'm going to write a book before I'm 50. And I started to research writing, the writing process and different types of writing process. And what I realized was that I am not a pantser, I am a plotter. And for anybody that's listening out there, the difference between a pantser and a plotter is a pantser will kind of have a seed of an idea and kind of run with it, and let the story kind of write itself. Whereas a plotter has to plot out the scenes and plot out the actual the beginning, the middle, and the end. They need to know where the turning points are to really get that story going and get to the end. And it took me, ironically, I suppose three or 4 decades to figure that out as to why I couldn't finish the book.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah. But do you think that there is a space for both? Sometimes
without a doubt, because I didn't really know about pantsing and plotting. I didn't really know about that. I think, when you love to do something, you assume that you're doing it right. So I wasn't aware that I just wasn't doing it right for me. You know what I mean? So it just took that journey, I suppose, to figure out that's how I'm going to actually start and finish a book. And now I'm ready to publish book 2. I've already written the first draft for book 3. So there you go. It's like finding the right key for the lock, isn't it?
So you have found your way of writing,
yes.
your style, your motivation.
Yeah.
Because when I did my first book, it was just poetry, and for me, poetry flows naturally. So I could be walking on the street, and a poem comes to me, and those were some of my best poems, and I just noted them, then put them together, and I put them in a book form. But then when I wanted to write my second book, it was all I needed to plan now. I couldn't use this
Yeah,
method of just bringing it
yeah,
together. It was like the flow wasn't there, the idea. So I had to sit down and tell myself, you're going to follow and write this and go in this way. So sometimes I think it depends on where you are in life, the creative flow, how it is,
very
because some
true.
books will just be born like that and you have
Yeah,
the ideas. Another book you really need to plot and plan and do everything. So in your time as a writer, have you had writing coaches? You had a writing coaches anytime?
I have not, but I actually, funny enough, you said that I had my first writing coach client this year. So I'm actually a writing coach for a budding writer at the moment.
Mhm.
Um, and I suppose in my other life, I'm a business specialist and learning specialist. I'm a business and learning specialist. Um, and so the person that I'm supporting is an entrepreneur.
Mm,
And I suppose that's my niche, ironically. So
I
although
see.
I'm a my genre of writing as S.N. Clayton is historical, black historical romance. As
Mm,
a writing coach, I'm doing something completely different. I'm leaning into my business side. It's just
yes.
two complete ends of the spectrum. But no, I never had a writing coach per se, but I read a lot and I bought books to read about the writing process. And as you said, there are different writing processes, and you've got to figure out which one is right for you in that situation. Because yeah, you can change that mindset a bit depending on what you're writing or that kind of flow of consciousness, what's coming through and how it's coming through. But I suppose I find the plotting side helps me with the blocks because I can already see. And there is still a little bit of pantsing. You do allow it to
Yeah.
organically, develop as well. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't not have a writing coach if I felt I needed it for a specific project. Especially if I'm leaning into another genre because I write dystopian sci-fi fiction as well. So it might be I might get one for that one day because I don't feel like it comes as naturally as the romance side. You know what I mean? So I
Mm.
definitely wouldn't rule it out.
So you said romance. So what brought you to romance, this genre?
I suppose it goes back to my late mum because my mum was a prolific Mills and Boone fan. You
Yes,
know,
I know Mills and Bones and yes. Yeah.
I mean, it was quite a big thing back in the day in the 70s,
Mhm.
especially when I was growing up. So, and that was her thing. I mean, me personally, I read anything. I read different genres, fiction, non-fiction, you name it. But my mum was just a romance fiend. It was just all about the romance. So, and it so happened that I would have books from different genres. I would finish them. I'm a very fast reader. So I wish I was as fast a writer as I am a reader. Trust me, it would just really be wonderful. But I'm
Yeah.
a ridiculously fast reader because my mum used to ask me, she's Jamaican, they have their little sayings. So she used to ask me, did I eat the books? Oh, mum, they're
Yeah.
right here. Look, I said, you just read too slow. So I'd start on her books, but she would vet them first, to see if it, just as my age kind of went up, it was okay. But yeah, certain things, she was just like, let me vet it first because I don't want you read anything
Mm.
inappropriate. Not that she really read anything that particularly inappropriate, to be honest. But that's, I think, I just got this love of, romance, romantic sagas, family sagas, where there's a romantic story, at the heart of it, and that happy ever after type thing. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like that was maybe my natural place to start writing. But there again, I love history.
So you twin the two, the history and the writing, the
Yeah,
romance writing, and then
yeah.
you chose a particular niche area, Black romance, because I don't think there's a lot of historical, probably Black romance novels in the UK. So did you have a
No,
lot of novels that you could look at and follow?
yeah, because I think it's a growing area.
Mm.
And I think my business head is there in the sense of, find the area that's in high demand and low supply. That's what I call it. So, you know, it's high demand with readers, but it's low supply in terms of writers, because it's not easy. It's not an easy genre to write,
Mm.
because you've got to do a lot of historical research, and then you've got to try and pull what's real and what's not real together and
Mhm.
align it in such a way that it becomes entertaining enough for people to actually be drawn in, but educational enough for people to want to keep reading as well. So it's bringing the two together. So the first book, A Shared History, which I published last year, you know, it's a lot of people have come and said to me, wow, you know, I didn't realize what was happening during that 19th century with people, with Black people and mixed race people who were quite influential. You know, they were well to do. I'm focusing on what was called the Black elite back then. They just didn't realize, I suppose, the significance of their existence. Although they were a
Mm.
minority, they were significant, and they came from the Caribbean, they came from America, they came from Africa, and they were also born here generationally. But it's not spoken about in mainstream
Mm.
history. And so I think it opens a lot, you know, it opens a lot of people's eyes as to the significance of our presence, and also the significance of how much autonomy we actually had in trying to move the race forward and overcome these obstacles and help each other and come together, you know?
Because I think sometimes when they think of stories about Black people, they always have one kind of story. You know, there's not a variety. It's always the same kinds of story. So I'm intrigued to know what was your the historical parts which were true and the historical parts that you added. So how did you get the balance between the two?
I must admit, the historian in me, although you know what you have to understand, mainstream historical romance has a lot of creativity with the truth.
Ah, okay.
Some
Um,
of the tropes, there's some typical tropes, you know, like
mm,
the scullery maid falls in love with the duke and they get married.
mm,
Come on, you know,
not gonna
on the historic record, I mean, you probably count on one hand when that happened. It didn't happen unless the
mm,
duke was estranged, you know, you know what I mean, kind of thing, from his
yes.
family, and you had to run away. So
Mm,
it's highly unlikely. However, that's usually the trope. Do you know what I mean? They come from a poor background, etc., etc.
mm,
Um, but it's accepted as a trope. It's kind of a fantasy, isn't it?
yeah.
The unfortunate thing is when it comes to Black writers or non-Black writers, inevitably, who are writing about Black people during that
Mm,
era, there's this kind of energy that it's like, well, that wouldn't happen. Do you understand? So actually,
mm,
what is factual, they're saying, people will say, oh, that didn't happen,
yeah.
because
So
they're so,
it's the facts sound almost not real.
that's right. So it goes back to what you're saying. They are
Yeah.
so used to seeing these kinds of Hollywood TV images of us during that
Mm,
time, like we were just stuck on the plantation. It's just plantation, plantation.
confrontation.
We were everywhere.
Mhm,
If there was a need for someone to assist you in your business, whatever that business was, or an industry, whatever that industry was, then they could buy a slave.
mm.
You know what I mean?
And I think they didn't understand anything that they, as you said, they were elite Black people
Yeah,
who
because there were
had
free black
money and
people. So I'm
yeah.
writing really post-slavery
Mm,
in terms of the UK, but the era I'm writing in, say like in the USA, they've only been out of slavery maybe a couple of so decades, so it's very
mm,
fresh. So they're still
mm,
building, and you know Jim Crow is coming in as well. So
mm,
they're kind of, it's post Reconstruction, and they're still building. So they're coming to the UK. There's lecturers, Black lecturers coming to the UK, talking about, you know, what it was like to be a slave, or coming to raise cash
mm,
to build back in the USA. So they're going around the diaspora to raise cash and that type
mm,
of thing. So you know, there were even obviously, like you said, during slavery, there were black people who were free, obviously, because they
Yes. Yes.
either were never enslaved, some people,
Mm,
or
mm,
they purchased their freedom somehow, or somebody had purchased their freedom. That's how you get a lot of when they try to say, oh, there's black slave owners. The majority of them were purchasing family and friends and trying to get. That's how you got them free. That's how you free, um, release them from their bondage. You had to purchase them, and then you become
yeah.
officially there, but obviously they're not going to be your slave. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
I think there's this perception of us that is very strange. But if you think about it, for example, a lot of African American inventors were actually
mhm.
former slaves. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
about it. How
Mm,
did they get into those industries? Because
mm,
they were slave assistants to a scientist or a slave assistant
yes.
to a laboratory.
Mm,
Do you understand? So whatever,
mhm,
if I own a grocery store and it's like I just want to buy a slave shopkeeper, shop assistant, I'll help in the shop. I might help somewhere else in the business. There might be a blacksmith.
mm,
They want an
yeah,
assistant. They buy a slave. So
mm,
a lot of our education is coming from Hollywood and TV,
mm.
and it's very much sound bites, and
It's
it's
not factual. Yeah.
not factual.
Mm, mm.
It's
Or
based.
it's so rooted in just a stereotype. It's just a
That's right.
stereotype.
And so you
Yeah.
have this image of we were only on the even on the
Mm.
plantation, they restrict us to certain roles.
Yes, we were only doing this.
Yeah,
And there were no smart, there were no creative people, there were
that's
no, and
right.
so yeah, so a lot of times when they see black people, like I think I was watching one in from France where the protagonist, his dad was white, his mom was a slave, but in the end he was a musician and he went to school in France and became one of the greatest musicians. But history never recorded him because of course you don't tell these stories of one of the greatest musicians being a black person. So you thought all these guys who were composers were white. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I think that that's the thing. So people have this image now that okay, a black person cannot be in this industry. You're
Right.
only like singers or sports people, but we can't be the doctors, lawyers, teachers, all that. It's just we are just these things because this is what history gave us. Yeah. So
It's a
I do.
difficult.
Mhm.
It's a lot of responsibility to write
Mhm.
in that genre because you have to be able to back up your facts. So we, whether you're a black writer or non-black writer, don't have much room for creative license because
Mhm.
certain questions are coming.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, it's unfair, but it's the reality. It's a
It's a
different
reality.
energy, but our books will most likely be as close to the facts as you could possibly imagine because because of that pressure, which
Mhm.
makes them for a more interesting story because it's unexpected.
Yeah.
People don't expect us to be in certain positions or have influence, or they don't expect us to be leading the activism. There's because usually in other books it's like a white savior. Yes, we had allies from other
Mhm.
races, which we need to acknowledge, but we were always leading that activism no matter what. And so I think that's very important to showcase. So going back to, I suppose, how I write and get the balance, I don't have too much creative license other than in the romance itself and the day
Mhm.
to day, what they might do, what they might, be doing and stuff like that. It's a lot of attention to detail because one small thing I can say, oh, I'm going to let them say this, but then I have to think, would they have said that back then? Then I have to do research.
Mhm.
When did we first start saying this phrase?
Huh.
I have to look for that because it's like, did we even say that back then? So I think I was quite strict with myself for the first book, A Shared History. And I still don't think I really had much creative license with the second book that's due out in October, A Shared Destiny. Um, so I think, yes, the first book, Celia, she is an independent black woman who's inherited generational wealth. Her parents, one is Jamaican background, one is African American. And I
Mhm.
go into how that even occurred. Because most people be thinking, well, Jamaicans were here, Bajans were
Mhm.
here, UK, well, there wasn't any people in the UK. Most people don't even get it that we were here. Americans are over there. It didn't quite work like that.
Mm.
You know, we traveled a lot. It's quite
Yeah.
strange. We traveled
Mm.
a lot and we connected a lot because we had a cause. We had a common global cause to
Mm.
extract ourselves from this situation of bondage. And after, you know, enslavement, we move into colonialism, which
Mm.
was minimally better in the
Mm.
sense that the status is different, but you still barely had any rights. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? So
Mm.
we were constantly on that. Okay, how do we connect? How do we support each other to kind of exchange communication and exchange information and figure out
Mm.
tools and strategies to extract ourselves from this situation? So there was a lot more interaction and working together than what people might think.
So is this why you came up with the title A Shared, what is a shared history for the first one?
Yeah, I think I shared history because it's still kind of a multicultural, multiracial setting. Because Celia's in a love triangle in the first one between a close family friend who is from the British gentry, he's white, and then a sort of old love of hers who's a Sierra Leone well-to-do businessman.
Mm.
Um, you know, he's of the nobility over there. So it's still multicultural. And I think what I'm trying to say is that Black history is global history. And I think with that book, I'm almost in my head was I need to set the record straight about certain things.
Mm.
And it is a big responsibility. It's quite stressful sometimes because, you know, I'm in a life where I'm in at a time of my life where I'm suffering from fog brain. And half
Yeah.
the time, if someone's asking me something, I'm like, oh God, am I even going to remember this little detail or you know what I mean? But
Yes, I know what you
I
mean.
think
Yeah.
that's part of the problem. Like I said, it's different energy when you're writing about Black characters in that era. And I think part of me was like, how do I be authentic and have something to back it up? And which is why, in the end, I looked at some of the other Black writers in that genre. And, you know, one in particular is called Beverly Jenkins. She kind of focuses a lot on the Black West in her historical fiction. And my third book is going to be based in the Black West of America. And I thought, and she does like a book list of her
Mm.
sources. And I said,
Mm.
yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Mm.
And the
Mm.
minute you kind of make it clear, I've got this book list, I've got these sources, I've, you know, these researchers and historians, you know,
Mm.
those are the sources I went to. It's on the historic records, and it's a mix of historians, it's a mix of researchers. So they're not just Black, they're not just white, they're not, it's a good mix of them.
Mm.
Um, you know, and that's what I'm saying. That's the attention of detail you have to go to because just in case someone kind of questions the validity
Yeah.
of what you're writing. But
Mm.
hey, at the same time, it is fiction. So if I wanted to make it all up, what's the problem anyway?
Yeah, yes, but yeah, because they people make up all different kinds of fiction stuff, so it could have happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But as you said, people make it as if, the races were quite separate and there was not that's this kind of interaction. But all along in history, you can see this, and even people's family history. Because there's a lot of Jamaicans who have this family history of, white landowners being with their own slaves and having mulatto kids, and you have this
Yeah.
whole history going on. And so yeah, so it wasn't as separated as people think. Okay, it's one race over here, one race over here. And as you said, the continents also were interacting. It wasn't just like America is here, Africa is there,
No,
Europe is there.
definitely
There was a
not.
lot of interaction
It
from the
was
beginning.
the age of that was the industrial revolution. People were trying to find a new life and make new waves, and they moved more often than you would actually think because they were trying to find success,
Yeah.
and jump on things like the gold rush. People
Mm.
around the world rushed to California and those areas to take advantage and get rich.
Mm.
So it's a lot more integrated than you would think in
Mm.
that respect. And also I would say to people, when you're looking at your family names, don't always assume, because you had legitimate relationships and it was mostly illegitimate, forced
Yes.
rape.
Mm.
Of
Mm.
course, there's that history. But you also
Mm.
have to remember They were, you know, white people, Indian people, Chinese people that had nothing to really do with any of that. And they were just doing their thing. There might have been an indentured servant, there might have been a business. They had nothing necessarily to do with enslavement. And people are going to have relationships with who they want to have relationships with. At the end of it, you have whatever laws you want, but you can't stop people from being attracted to each other.
Yeah.
So what you might find, I find with a lot of people, they assume because they've got a European name, that would be the slave master. But a lot of times that's actually not the case. Sometimes
Yes.
it's just a person, a European person, whether man or woman, who one of your ancestors had a relationship with, an actual legitimate relationship with, especially post-slavery. You wouldn't be able to make the connection unless you do the research. Do you understand?
Exactly.
So sometimes when you buck up on a European person and you've got the same surname, I think both would assume that you know, they would have been your slave master, but no, that could be your relative because one of your relatives married a white person, and then they have, you know, what would have been termed mulatto children. Those mulatto children could marry a black person, a mixed race person, a white person, an Indian. So you don't know what the connection is. So I would say don't always assume that it's a slave master connection, because sometimes it isn't. And that's what I say, it's another thing, this trope. There were people from all walks of life having relationships.
Yeah.
Multicultural relationships, multiracial relationships. People, I don't know why people think it started happening in the 20th century.
Yes, that's the thing. People think it's a recent thing, but it's always been around. Yeah, yes.
Of human, once the race has evolved.
Yeah, it's always been around. So I think that is a shock for people when they see this, because it's like, it's like, having a mixed race kids and this, and you're like, but these things have been around for centuries. They are not new things that are
There's nothing new
happening.
under the sun. There's nothing new. It might not have been approved of, but there's nothing new under the sun. And so I think when I did the research for this book, it did make me see things a little bit differently in terms of if I because my surname is quite rare, but if I buck up on somebody now who's white and they have the surname, I'm not gonna assume that that relationship comes from a slave being taken advantage of, raped. Do you understand? Because I've realized that there's actually one key mixed relationship in my family on the Clayton side. And that's a 4 times great grandfather of mine. The 3 black man had a relationship with a white woman in Jamaica. Can you believe that? So it's interesting. And I just assumed that mulatto ancestor, I just assumed they were from a rape. That's what I assumed, but no, it wasn't. It actually wasn't.
But I think so what I would want to ask you, was there anything that surprised you when you were doing your research? Was there anything that popped out and you said, wow, this is really a surprise as you were researching for your book?
Yeah, I had to, because the first book, A Shared History, the main protagonist, Celia, her father is Jamaican. And like I said, she inherited a good amount of money from him. And he was a black sailor. So I had to read a book called Blackjacks, and it's about black sailors during this timeline, say from about maybe 15th, 16th century, right up until slavery kind of ended, and post-slavery there wasn't so much of them. But I looked at the book, and it's by Jeffrey B. Bolster, and Jeffrey W. Bolster, Blackjacks. And I thought, oh God, this is going to be really boring. I just don't find this sailoring thing interesting. Well, let me tell you something. I couldn't put the book down. I think I've read the book about 3 times. Wow. Because it was like a swashbuckling, Errol Flynn adventure reading this book. When you see these black men and mixed race men, and it was actually, being a sailor back then, it was a tough life anyway for anybody. But for us, being a slave sailor or a free sailor, it was actually a status. It was a status symbol. Because remember, they're traveling around the world. And in certain cases, where they're traveling locally, where they're working locally, whether in the Caribbean or America, and they might be captain in a ship and given a lot of responsibility. And this is how some of them became entrepreneurial, because they will buy stuff and then sell it as they go around the world. But I think the central thing was the blackjacks became our mainstream media. Because whatever was going on in the Caribbean, when they go to America, they would tell them what's happening. If there's a rebellion, they'll tell them what's happening. If they go to the Caribbean and there's a rebellion in America, they tell them what's happening. If they go to Africa and things are happening, they'll tell them what's happening. They'll come back to the UK, they'll tell everybody what's happening. So a lot of what we knew around globally was coming from these blackjacks. And I recommend anybody to read the book, because I've read it. And I went in very sort of, oh, this is going to be dry and boring. And it was so exciting to read. And it was a bit of a shock to find out how they've been forgotten. They've actually been forgotten. The first time I really see them come up in recent times was in that film Harriet, about Harriet Tubman. You see the blackjacks in that, which I was really happy to see. But they could have like a series in itself, you know, and these were Black and mixed race men from Africa, from America, from the Caribbean, from the UK. They were very integral to the American Revolution. They were integral to the civil. These people were everywhere, I'm telling you, and they had a certain level of autonomy. Amazingly, they had a lot of responsibilities, but they had a tough life. Some of them, I would say, many of them, probably most of them, you know, maybe died impoverished, but there's a good amount that made good of it, made good of their skills. These were skilled men. And I was really quite shocked at how much people relied on them for information and communication, you know, but they were very swashbuckling as well. So it was like, like reading a movie, like, whoa, like what's going on here? You know, they did fantastic. You know, anybody who has one of them as an ancestor should be proud, you know.
Well, yeah, I've never heard, I mean, I've never heard so much about them. I've just heard mention of them. So I didn't know there was a whole book about that. So that's quite interesting. So the history and doing the research took you into different areas and different learning new things about the history and seeing that we were in different spaces. Okay, so in doing that, how do you think that brought either joy or pain in your own life as you were writing this book?
I think that, and I actually think that when you read, it is painful to read about our history, but I also think it's very inspiring. Because you think if you could get through that in that situation, you know, then why am I complaining about certain things? Like it's contextual, isn't it? In the sense of, you know, we're living in a damn time, we're in that bubble, we're in that reality, aren't we? But it does take you into another reality. And it just makes you think, wow, you know, what people can achieve against all the odds, you know. So I find it at times it's very difficult to deal with, and so you actually have to take a step back sometimes and just get some space, because it's so intense. And like I said, it's not like Hollywood, it's not black and white like Hollywood movies and TV shows. It is a very complex system of subjugation and oppression, and there's many variables and moving parts, and it's a lot to take in, and then you have to try and align everything so that it makes sense to the reader, and then you have to also make it an entertaining read. So it's the energy, it's like, it can be quite draining. But I think once you start pulling each chapter together and you're going back over it, I think the key is, if I am reading it back and I'm enjoying it, then my reader hopefully will enjoy it. If I'm reading it back and I'm not enjoying it, then that's a good sign your reader ain't going to enjoy it either. You know what I mean? So I think you kind of have to follow that. But yeah, there is that trying to strike a balance. You don't want to depress people.
No, it's not that, yeah.
Very
You want
difficult.
to bring up the pain and the joy together, the
Yeah,
pain
yeah,
and
you
the
have to
joy.
really create that balance, that real balance of not, you want people to be informed, but you don't want to like depress them through the whole book. That's not what other people can write like that, and that's their purpose. That's not, I don't feel like that's my purpose, to focus on just the negative. And also, I think I made a very conscious decision to focus on the Black elite, or what was known as the Black elite around the diaspora back then. Because as you said, it's just always the same old, same old. No, we had people of influence. Of course, we had people of influence who could mix with people from all walks of life. Because how else would we get out of certain situations? We
Yeah.
needed allies, and we needed each other most of all, but we also needed allies from all walks of life. So we had to
And the fact
work.
and the fact is they were always smart, intelligent Black people, men and women. They've always been, the people,
Yes.
because you look at us and all the skill and all the talent that we had, it's been in our bloodline a long time. So it's always been there. So
Who
it's
do you
not
think they
something,
brought from
yes.
Africa? They didn't bring, they brought the best of the best. They brought intellectuals, they brought nobility, they brought craftspeople. Do you understand? I mean, they took them from civilized societies, contrary to what people believe. They say, oh, Black people couldn't read. No, they couldn't read English.
English, but
But
they
if
had their
they
own
were from
system
the
and language.
literary world, and if they were scholars,
Yeah,
they could
yeah,
read,
yeah.
because we did have writing. So it
Mm.
all depends on who you're talking about and who you took over here. So there's a way you say things, and it just sits in people's consciousness, subconscious, doesn't it? As a kind of stereotypical thing. But if, for example, they used to bring Senegal horse breeders and trainers
Yes.
to America to come and train breaking their horses in America. They knew what they were doing. They knew,
Yeah, they were
especially
talented
we had specialist
people.
blacksmiths. Look at the craftsmanship of the crafts of Benin tribe. Look at that. So these are the people they're bringing over, because these people were building their plantation houses. These people were in the blacksmiths doing this craftsmanship, that craftsmanship. These were masons, So people need to understand. People don't just come over here with a blank head and a blank slate and then have to
Yeah, blank slate,
how to do
nothing.
it.
Yeah.
They came
Yeah.
here with skills, knowledge, and intelligence. Yes, in certain situations that's been lost over time because we weren't allowed to build on that. If you stop a person's development for centuries, or you limit that development, then there's
Or
going to be
only a
less of
certain
us
way.
with that knowledge and those skills, because there's going to be less of us that will have the opportunity to build on that. You know what I mean? But we still managed to, produce all these inventors.
That's right.
Phoenix
Yeah.
still managed to come out of the ashes. African Americans should be very proud of.
And not only the sad parts, but as you said, the pain and the joy, they continue to have the celebrations and show both that we're not always having a sad, depressed story, but we also
No,
have
no, not at all. Because
other
you know what we're
stories.
like, as
Yeah.
people, even when we're going through hardship, we still manage to laugh and celebrate what we need to celebrate, and dance, and because that's how you keep your psyche going. Do you know what I mean? We always manage to find that positive out of the negative. I think as a collective, we sure know how to enjoy ourselves. Whether it's music or dancing or food, you know,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
cultural kind of things that
Mhm.
everybody.
Which is the real resilience, and that's what people don't know. Because nowadays they're saying, okay, go back to the arts, go back to the this, because this is what is helping your mental health, and this is what we were doing from way back when, using these things to help us to that we could go past our problems, all
Yeah.
the things that we were bottling up. So yeah, so that kudos to the people, the Black people, the Black historians, and all those who have kept this part of the story alive, not just the sadness.
Mm.
So, in your book, which character do you think you're most like?
Do you know what? Never thought about that. It's funny because Okay. I'll tell you what, because Celia has an entrepreneurial spirit, and the second book, the mixed race character, Georgia, who I'll quickly just, she owns a bookstore. She's genetically linked to the aristocracy, excuse me, and she's quite entrepreneurial, and she doesn't want to lose her independence. So they're quite different because Celia wants to get married. She just doesn't know who she wants to marry. Yes, she's in the love triangle, but Georgia's never really. She don't really want to get married. She don't want to lose her independence because back then, when you get married, the man would own your property, own you, in fact, own you and own your assets. So that was always a thing with her. So in the second story, she's got this dilemma where she's been left with an abandoned baby, grows a connection to that child, doesn't really know what to do because in polite society, especially as a mixed race woman, she'd be open to gossip. They're going to probably say it's her child. What is the story around? So even though it's not true, and so there's an ex-rake called Daniel, who's actually a curate, the most unlikely curate, scandalously handsome, and he offers her, his hand in marriage to kind of say, look, I'll give you a respectable image with this child, but he wants something out of it, so everybody's got their own motives. So that's her dilemma in that story. So I think what runs through, both characters is a level of autonomy over their lives, regardless of whether they want to be in a relationship or not, and a level of entrepreneurial spirit. So I don't think character-wise I'm necessarily like them, but I think there is that in me. I do have this entrepreneurial spirit. I do have this obsession with having autonomy over my life. I don't care what the situation. I really am obsessed with that. I'm a bit of a free spirit. And I think both of them are a little bit of a free spirit in that respect. But it's funny because a friend of mine, when she read the book, she was like, it was so strange because in the narration of it, she goes, I could see that was you. But I wrote it, innit?
But they do say we do
Just
write
like yeah,
some of it is
you could tell it was me. Yes. My kind of narration, the way that I would say things, I think the way, even though I would say it in 19th century style, it's just still my sort of maybe sense of humor in there. So as much as you might try and say I'm going to step back, there is very much your essence is running through.
Yeah. So for you then, do you identify then with what do you think of the male characters? So you have the female characters who are free spirits. What about the male characters?
I feel like the male characters, they have to be likable, don't they? Yeah. I've read books where they're just not likable. They're actually quite, like some romance stories, but they just irritate you. In fact, sometimes it's just both characters are irritating me, and I'm just like, they shouldn't be irritating me. They shouldn't be perfect. They should be flawed, and they should have vulnerabilities. But they shouldn't be annoying me. To be quite frank, they should not be irritating me. Like their personality. I'm not talking about when they do something mad and you just think, why did you do that? But they get through it. Is the person. I just feel like they need to be likable. They need to be relatable. And I think that's what I've done with the male characters. They're not perfect, but they are relatable and they're likable. And I think it's sometimes you've got to think about who's reading these books. You've got it kind of fits into that new adult and adult. So you've got youngsters reading this book, and so you do have a certain level of responsibility when you're writing romance to understand that people are impressionable, and young people. And so you've got to write characters, especially male characters, that if they act in a certain way, they get humbled. They work through that because you shouldn't be accepting certain behavior. And it works the same way. The male characters shouldn't be accepting certain behavior from the female characters. So if the female characters are certain things, they need to get humbled. So it's almost like, when you go to church and you read, you might go to church every Sunday and they read you some kind of proverb or some kind of story where someone's acting a little bit out of order, and then the moral of the story is they get humbled anyway.
Get covered.
Always get humbled. It's a
I like
kind of
that.
moral teaching, you know, it's a
Yeah.
moral teaching. So I think you can use your writing. It's romance and it's about a relationship. I think there's a responsibility to use your writing to show how a man should be treating a woman and how a woman should be treating a man.
I like that, yes.
And you can
Because it's
still
not
be, you
just,
can make
yeah,
mistakes,
yes, yes.
but you know, you have to get humbled. You have to get
Mhm.
humbled. Both of you have to get humbled. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, you make me want to read the book, and I'm definitely going to. So can you just tell us like where we can find it, your book and all of that?
right. So my website is SN Clayton, SCLAYTON.com. So SNClayton.com. You can purchase A Shared History, the first book in the Black Victorian series. And you can pre-order A Shared Destiny, which is the second book, which is going to be out in the autumn. So you can pre-order that from various different channels. So if you go to the website, it's all on the first page. So all the information, everything, the breakdown of the stories are on the first page. And you can also join my website as well from there. Not my website, my mailing list rather.
Is there going to be like an audiobook or anything like that?
Yes, actually, someone was asking me that yesterday. They were like, "Oh, my friend wants to know, is there an audio book?"
Yeah.
I do hybrid publishing, so there's a level of investment, and so
Mhm.
these things take time. So I think
Yeah.
once the second book is out, that's where I'm gonna look at doing the audio book. And funny enough, I'm thinking about crowdfunding for that. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'll do once the second book is out, then I can do the audio for both of them. Because that's
Both
just,
of them.
you know, as an
Yeah.
author, you're trying
Mhm.
to, you know, build your author business. You've got to look at all these different
Mhm.
routes of demand, you know, of audience demand. And obviously audio is the way to go, isn't it? You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
it takes a certain level of investment. And so you have to kind of, you know, what's that saying? Slow and steady wins the race. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
slow and steady, even though I'm like, oh, hurry up. But, you know, it is slow and steady wins the race. And I'm trying to
Mhm.
keep my strategy aligned with where I'm at. If that makes
Mhm.
sense. You know?
And have you thought about maybe getting it into book clubs and different things? Because I
Oh,
know book
definitely.
clubs are,
Yeah,
choosing
definitely.
some of
But
these kind of
it,
books.
that side of things, you know, it's a whole different ballgame. Like the marketing and sales side of things
Mm-hmm.
is a whole different ballgame. Like I'm working with a sales rep to get the
Mm-hmm.
book into bookstores around the UK and libraries, and you would not believe how tough it is to, you know. So that's because you've got the business to customer side, which is quite difficult anyway, marketing and sales wise, and then you've got the business to business side. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely would like to get into book clubs, but then that's another thing where it's time and energy. So you've got to think about your timings. You've got to think about, okay, who can help me with this? Who can maybe support me with some PR? So it's all in the strategy, but I always have to kind of meet myself where I am at.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to move faster, but this book thing takes a while. This
Yeah, it
book,
takes a while. And as you're
I'm getting
writing and
busy.
marketing and doing everything, it
I'm
does
getting to
take,
know. I'm
yeah,
still getting to know. I'm, you know, technically, I still feel like I'm still a new author. I only just published my
yeah,
first book last year. I mean, it
yeah,
took me 5 years
yes,
to get there, but I'm
yeah.
still a new author. So I'm still researching and discovering all the different avenues in which you can build
Mm-hmm.
an author business. You know, I want to be an authorpreneur. I want to look at different channels and how I can
Mm-hmm.
actually build that business. So it just takes time.
Yes, I'm well aware of that, after my first book. And yes, and I think a lot of it comes also from the partnerships you build, also a lot of the other things you do. So, for example, speaking at different workshops, webinars, as you said, coaching. So it gives you the exposure. Then you have to do other things with it, how you bring it all together.
Mm.
And I've never been an entrepreneur, so I'm also having to learn those things now, what it is to be an entrepreneur, marking that part. So yeah, so a number of things, as you said. So as part of this show, we have what is called the diamond drop. So the diamond drop is all about what is maybe one thing from your book or one thing from you, the author, that you would like to leave with the listeners. What's that diamond thing you think from your book that you want to leave?
I think, what's the diamond thing? I don't think it's from, I think it would be, I encourage you to look at my books as a whole, so the Black Victorian series as a whole, and start with A Shared History, carry on through A Shared Destiny, and then the third book, A Shared Promise, takes you to the Black West of America. I touch on 19th century New York and the Black West, Black cowboys, Black ranchers, you name it. And so I think that this genre in general is a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
And I think it will really open your eyes in terms of where we're at now. Because you will understand, you know, why we've been up against what we're up against. But also, you will understand from those, I think, from the series itself, the essence within us and the dynamics within us that make us who we are. I think what I've written is multifaceted. It's not a monolith. And I think we as Black people are not a monolith. And I feel like that this series shows you how many different types of Black there are, you know, and potentially how many different types of Black we can be. And I think that's really important to us as a people, to allow each other to be the Black we want to be, to be the purpose we are, you know, because that's the essence, that's God's purpose, that's the life on a spiritual level that you've chosen, and that's the path that's been created for you. And I think these stories really capture that, you know, because in the last book, I would say Amelia, who is George's sister, she goes on an adventure to America to be a mail order bride. Now, this is crazy. Like, who? But do you know how many people used to do that? So it's crazy stuff, but it's reality, and it's inspiring. You know, we are inspiring as a people. But what's also inspiring is that we do have allies, and we have to give thanks for those allies as well. You know, we have them now. So yeah, I feel like the whole series is like a diamond in the rough. You know, especially I think you don't hear a lot about Caribbean and UK Black people during that era. It's mostly the focus is on African Americans, because their experience was so prolific, because it went all the way past slavery into Jim Crow and segregation. You know, so I think it's nice to just build us into that narrative and show that we are diamonds in the rough, in the sense that we are more together than we're apart. And that's what I think is the essence of that book series.
I love that, diamond in the rough. And as I listened to you, I was just like, you know, I want more people to come to this knowledge, to come to this understanding. Because as you said, we are not just one kind of Black person, and we should be proud to be who we want to be. We shouldn't be put in a box and say, this is who you must be and where you should be and what you should do. And as we as authors are sitting here coming from also shared history, it's so refreshing to listen to you, to hear how you speak bold and eloquently and just share the story. It's really, really, really refreshing. And I just want to encourage you and just say to you, I, you know, hope your books will get out there and people will hear the stories and they can see this diamond in the rough, and they can also see another version different from this Hollywood story, that there
Yes.
are other stories to tell.
Oh, thank you.
Stories
Thank
to
you so
tell.
much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the platform that you've given me to talk about my work, and ask me some really thoughtful questions that actually, you know, makes you think, doesn't it? Because you just
Yeah, yeah.
think of that. So yeah, I really thank you. And I wish you all the best with your show and your author journey.
Thank you. And as this is about the water cooler show, when you sit down to write, what is your beverage of choice when you're writing or you're taking a break? Do you have coffee, tea?
Um, I don't know. think I think it's whatever I'm feeling at the time. It all depends when I'm writing, I think. It
Mhm.
all depends when, because if it's during the day and then I stop for lunch and I'll make tea. So maybe I'll
Mhm.
make some tea and I'll still have the tea. Do you know what I mean? If
I
it's
know
in
what
the
you mean.
morning, the same thing, it will probably be tea. But in the
Mhm.
evening, if I'm gonna need to get some stuff done, if it's a weekend, especially because I mostly work on the weekend, I might have a glass of red wine.
Mhm. Yeah, nice.
Needed.
Okay. Yeah, you also need that. Yeah. So yeah, so and as you know, as we have conversations and as we have this, we just continue to encourage each other as authors. So today, just your last word you want to leave with us, and then we will close out. Any last words?
For authors, for potential
For
authors,
authors, for your readers, for anyone who's listening.
I would say, as an author and as a reader, try and keep an open mind
Hmm.
and be open to learning different things about not only others, but through that written or written word, whether it's written by you or whether you're reading it. I
Hmm.
think that helps you also to learn things about yourself. Think about why you're reading that book, um, and how it can help you develop or just simply bring you joy,
Yeah.
you know?
Because it doesn't have to
It's
be, it can
joyful.
just be
Reading
for
is
joy.
joyful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
reading
just
is
be for
joyful,
joy.
writing is joyful. It doesn't
Just,
have to
just,
be.
just like you said when you were young, you were reading all these books and you were just reading them so quickly. It was just for you and for joy, and you were not really, yeah. So sometimes books can just be our friends. We can be learning. We can just do it for joy, and
Love,
we can be writing for
I
joy
love
too. I
that. Yeah,
just
I
love
love
those
that. Books can be
stories.
our friends. I love that because
Yeah.
I think that you do kind of certain characters you do kind of really get drawn to, don't you?
Hmm.
And you might read that book time and time again. So yeah, in a way, it does become your friend and your comfort in a way because it's so joyful, because it is about escapism, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sanji. Thank you for sharing with us. And we're just going to close out now. So this is the water cooler chat show with S.N. Clayton, and her books you can find at what snclayton.com.
That's
You can her first book, Shared History, and you can pre-order the second book. And we are looking forward to the whole series. And I will be getting into the series too, and we will be sharing more about it. So we hope you come back as we move from, this into maybe the TV show. So we'll hear more about that. But thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. So now my